subscribe and you might get a free cookie voucher. Alright, what are we talking about? Ungracefully Grace. Not an isekai. Not really a revenge story either. It's interesting. I would probably give it like an 8. Ooh, I was looking at 8. Sorry. I'll probably give it an 8. If you haven't figured out by now, I'm always doing this with a mouse, so sometimes it gets pretty bad. Alright, so what's the gist? This girl gets banished from her, like, marquee. I think she's a marquee. Basically, she's the heiress, but she gets in a fight with, like, 17 nobles, beats the shit out of them, and then gets banished for a year. And the story basically picks up when she comes back. The general idea is basically just her, like, sorting her shit out after returning. This guy is kind of like... So the basic gist is she gets... she's very loyal to the royal family. They need her to, you know, investigate some things, and this guy is forced to tag along with her. He, to her, is just like a commoner mage that's just really capable, but in reality, he's like a noble from a dukedom that just doesn't really like being associated with being a noble. So we just see her kind of working for the princess to solve different cases, things like that, while also kind of her trying to like sort out her family situation, because when she comes back, everything is like going downhill. Her father like banished her mother, things like that, and it's just like, I don't know what's going on. There's like a family there, of course. I would say it's a little atypical in terms of like structure compared to what I previously have seen. Basically, there's her in her family. There's, you know, the father. There's this new mother, and then there's this, you know, daughter. Or sister, I guess, in her case. The gist is her father's like an asshole. He's just kind of there to be a dick to her and things like that, and then she believes that, you know, he did something that, you know, ousted her mother for no reason, and she's kind of investigating that as well as trying to take over the Marquis estate. General gist. The mother's kind of interesting because it's a stepmother situation, but she's like seemingly a decent person. She's actually like a pretty good person, which is a little weird because normally in these stories, whenever you see a stepmother, they're pretty bad. Now her sister is a pretty typical one. She's, you know, trying to screw with her, basically. But how they go about things is pretty interesting because the main character, as established at the start, like, she's not afraid of getting in fights. As a matter of fact, she's like a knight, basically. So she just, like, messes this girl up. Typically in these stories, you know, they'll do, like, little tricks and things like that, and, you know, the main character will just kind of have to suck it up, and eventually, you know, things will work out. But, like, no, she's instantly, like, aggressive toward this person. And, like, I don't know, like, if they rip up a dress or something, like, she just says, like, yeah, I did it. And then she'll do it, like, for real. She'll rip up their actual dress. Like, she's not, like, against petty things. She's not really opposed to, like, threatening people. Like, it's a very different vibe. If anything, I would say it probably more akin to what, like, an actual noble would be like. So yeah, like, the daughter is just kind of like a non-threat. Most of the story is basically just like a mystery where she's, you know, figuring out what happened to her mother. This guy is also hiding his identity while also kind of starting to form a little bit of attachment there, because the gist is, like, they don't... Their relationship, I would say, is actually relatively well done, because they really don't like each other at the start, but like it's not like one of those things where just like a flip and then like a flip of a switch and then boom, they love each other. Like no, it's not really like that. Like he actually has to, you know, slowly form this attachment by watching her things like that. It's not something that's just like bang, I love you, which I think is pretty appealing in terms of storytelling. I certainly like it a lot more than other stories I've read. I don't know, it's a pretty fun idea, I would say. Like I like how that romantic relationship is done because it feels like it's natural progression. You know, like she and him just slowly work together. He makes some assumptions about her. She does, you know, she has some assumptions about him, and then they slowly start to see that those assumptions aren't really right. And then they kind of become closer over time. It's not just, like I said, not that switch, which I really appreciate, because typically in these stories you have that switch and then it's just like, bang, they love each other, and it's, I don't know, it's not as appealing to me. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate like how they dealt with that daughter or sister or whatever you want to call her. It's a little more realistic. It's also just a fresh-paced kind of thing. Like, it's not like, oh, the male lead has to deal with her. It's like, no, she does it. I don't know. It's pretty good, I would say, for the most part in terms of that. Also, props for the title. It's not like 50 pages long. The father's kind of typical in this story, which I think is maybe a slight downside. Just, you know, the typical, like, bad dad. The stepmother, I think, is relatively unique, which I'll give some props for. I don't know, it's just, it definitely has some appealing vibes. Art-wise, I don't think it really stands out that much, but it's still good enough to get by. I mean, I think it's not really doing anything super new, but I think it's fresh enough that I like it. Like, I don't know. I think the biggest thing for me is definitely like the storytelling. You know, there's those typical beats in these kinds of stories, that, you know, you always see pretty much, but this one at least somewhat subverts them. Like the whole stepsister thing is dealt with really quick. I mean, just I appreciate minor differences, and I feel like this one has enough where I enjoy it. The relationship isn't like, you know, super like storybook. It feels a little more natural progression. I like that. I appreciate like a female lead actually taking things into her own hands. A lot of the times in these stories, they'll make the female lead to be like, oh, she's super strong, but then, you know, she never really displays that. It's just people saying it, and in reality, her actions make her look weak. So I appreciate that the story subverts that and actually makes her, you know, a strong female lead. She actually does things that are relatively impressive, and it's like, she sorts her own shit out. I appreciate that. I don't know, I guess just to wrap everything up, I'll do the old SAE. What is the SAE? Well, it's story, art, enjoyment. Story-wise, I'm gonna give this an 8. I really liked it. It did everything I like about the other stories to a high degree and high quality, while also adding new things that I think were positive additions. So I think an 8's a pretty fair rating. Art-wise, it's not bad, but it doesn't do anything super unique special, so my typical rating for something that's just quality but not necessarily unique is about a 7. Like, it's good quality art, and it looks fine, and I like it, and the designs aren't bad. It's just not groundbreaking, so I can't give it that 8. 8 is normally something to me that stands out. This one doesn't really do that in terms of art. Enjoyment-wise, I would give it an 8. It's fun. I like it. It's a fresh-paced kind of read. It does some stuff a little bit differently, and it does, you know, those different elements really well, so I think it leads to a pretty good story. So overall, I think an 8's good rating. Um, I think, the story is definitely stand out for me. An 8. It's a very, very solid story. Um, and that led to a lot of enjoyment for me because it was just different compared to a lot of other stories I read. Really, the only thing where it's like not super special is the art, where it's well done, but it's not groundbreaking. It doesn't stand out that much. It's just good. It's just quality. But I think overall, like an 8's a pretty fair rating. It's a solid story. I like it. I think, it's definitely something I'd recommend if someone asked. Um, Especially in like that genre of like fantasy, like, oh, here's like the heroine and she has to deal with all these problems. I feel like this one is like a heroine that's actually entertaining and like a fun character to root for. So I kind of appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, I think that's about it. I'd appreciate if you could like, comment, subscribe, maybe leave another story you want me to read down below, and yeah, bye.